Hello, everybody, and welcome back to day 2 of the Something Green Wedding Fair brought to you by Northumberland Waste Authority. Now, yesterday we had a whole host of sustainable experts lined up for you, and we've got exactly the same today. This morning, I'm joined by Nanna from Splendid Stitches, who's going to be talking to us all about vintage accessories. And then at 12 p.m, I'm going to be speaking to Jacinta O'Riordan about feasting. But first up, Nanna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing today?
Really well. Slightly confused about this whole clock change, but other than that, ready for spring, ready for summer, ready for some action, basically.
Fingers crossed we get a little bit more sunshine. That would be a
Well,
fantastic.
exactly.
So can you tell me a little bit about what Splendid Stitches is?
Yes, well, so basically we are based just near King's Cross, and I specialize in altering and repairing vintage and have done that for a bit more than a decade now. And a big part of that, of course, is also helping brides with their wedding dresses. A lot of them come to me with their grandmother's wedding dress, their mother's wedding dress, vintage wedding dresses that we then also repair to get them ready for the big day. And of course, a big part of that is also then the rest of the outfit. And it's things like helping with the veils, the accessories, advice on shoes, and also quite often it's bridesmaids and it's mother of the bride. So before you know it, the whole wedding party get roped in, which is wonderful. So it's always really nice to see how it all comes together from basically a crumpled heap to a load of people looking fabulous.
And is this something that's become more of a trend? More people are looking for secondhand accessories and vintage accessories to kind of finish off the wedding?
I actually think it's something that has definitely come a long way in the last decade. And we remain to be seen, of course, what's happened now with the whole pandemic and how that has changed people's attitude. But certainly with inquiries I'm getting at the moment, there is a real focus of brides really wanting to make sure that it's not just the dress, it's the whole wedding that needs to be more sustainable and less wasteful. And that's a really good thing to see, actually, that it's kind of reaching the mainstream way of thinking rather than just a few people who were thinking that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking a little bit about this yesterday, but the idea of, how far can you go in making
Mm.
things sustainable when you can only really control what you're doing? You don't
Mhm.
have that much of a say about what everyone else is doing. So have you seen, spaces where people encourage their guests to do something a bit more secondhand or, not buy something new?
Yeah, well, that's in fact something I find really interesting is the whole embracing of something old and something borrowed. Because actually, I think now with the generation that's getting married now and the younger people, they have a real understanding of what sustainability is. But actually, the older generation want to do it, but are finding it very hard to actually understand how to put this into practice. So something like asking the wedding party instead of, often you would see wear something green or wear something blue, wear something old or wear something borrowed is something that could really start changing people's mindset, because you're then actually, as the people having the wedding, the people getting married, you are asking something of your guests to try and think sustainably about how they arrive at the wedding and what they do. And it's just that the kind of nudge mentality where you can go, well, actually think about what you do. Don't go out and buy something completely new outfit. I know before the pandemic, there was some research that showed that more than 10,000 outfits were intended to be worn just for wedding to be worn once. That's obviously
Oh,
completely crazy. So the whole thing about inviting something borrowed or getting people to actually wear something that they've got already or something vintage, that's goes a really, really long way.
and do you think that's something that, people are responsive to? Does it feel like a bit of a relief that they're not going to have to go out and buy a brand new dress to wear to a wedding?
I think so. I mean, a lot of people, obviously, some people really enjoy that whole thing, and that let them be them. But I think just to kind of plant that thought in people's mind goes a really long way. And actually, another one is obviously things like the bridesmaids and the ushers. Now, the amount of hideous bridesmaids dresses I've seen that are, to be worn once and is a hideous polyester that have been imported for China is just really, really sad. So the whole thing about, well, why not have a bridesmaid party where everyone gets together and we go, well, do you know what do we already have in our wardrobes that we can borrow of one another? It's that kind of thing where you then maybe set a color scheme, and then maybe it's a couple of accessories that then binds it all together. But there's absolutely no reason why bridesmaids need to all have something completely new and sourced that they will only wear once. The other one is, for example, again, wearing vintage, where you choose, I don't know, they could all be wearing Laura Ashley Prairie dresses, which is something that's really fashionable at the moment. And then that's what ties it together. It's just trying to ask the question and be a little bit creative instead of just going down the prescribed route, but actually go in there and just think, well, what actually works for me? What works for the rest of my party? And it's all in the mind, and that's a first and biggest hurdle.
So do you think people are trying to battle against an expectation of what they think that they should be doing when they're planning a wedding, rather than thinking
Absolutely.
about what they actually want?
I think absolutely, and hopefully the pandemic will allow everyone to reset a bit. But it's very easy. I see it all the time. It's very easy to get caught up in expectations and what the more commercial suppliers expect. What they say, well, you need to do this, you need to do that. But actually, you have to go stop. What is the ethos? What is that I want to achieve with this? Because at the end of the day, a wedding is about the celebration of two people who love one another, and that is, you've got to remember, that's at the core of it. Everything else is nice, but at the end of the day, it's about, two people wanting to spend the rest of their lives together.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way of looking at things. And when people are coming to you
Mhm.
to kind of get this advice, what sort of things are you helping them look for? Because I imagine it's a little bit overwhelming sometimes when people aren't really sure what they're wearing, and then suddenly you're
Mhm.
adding in hats and shoes and bags and shawls and all kinds of things, which make it a much bigger decision.
It's a long process. Usually we start a good year and a year for, and we always usually start with the dress. And then the next thing that comes is then the underwear and the shoes. But that's a technical thing, because once you've got the underwear and shoes, you can then do the rest of the alterations and look at the dress. Then comes, I always ask about jewelry as well. And then how are they going to have their hair, and what are they going to have on their head? And usually we'll try a few different things. It's interesting how the veil seems to be falling out of favor.
Mm-hmm.
And there's much more in terms of flower crowns and tiaras, and smaller hats, little birdcage veils that you see as well, and combs is another thing as well. And I think that's probably also because the way that we live now, people have usually lived together for a number of years before they decide to get married. So the veil isn't always something that they want to make a big feature. And then I always ask about accessories as well. What bag are they going to have? Obviously, one of the maids are going to carry that usually, or the mother. And it all comes around from there. But usually, by the time we get to the second and the last fitting, it takes a while to get into the full attire, let's put it that way. But I usually, if people don't know where to go, I have a number of people that I usually point them towards, such as Chloe Haywood, who makes hats from upcycled materials and make sure that nothing goes to waste. But a
Okay.
little hat like that, this is really, really cute. And tiaras as well that she makes. And then I've London based as well, in Islington, Michelle Krautz, who makes beautiful tiaras from old vintage jewelry
Oh,
that she then
wow.
resets. Something like this is obviously absolutely fabulous if you look at that.
Yeah, that's
And she's got
gorgeous.
lots of different colorways, and there's also hair combs like this, which
Oh, wow.
obviously can work as well. So it's thinking about those things, and how can you incorporate something old and something that's not wasteful into the overall outfit.
And when you're kind of sending people off to have a hunt around for vintage things or helping them decide what they might like, do you have any top tips for, finding something secondhand and finding something vintage and knowing that it's going to be really good quality?
Oh, no, that's a good question. But the interesting thing is that usually vintage is good quality, and I think that anything that's kind of older than 20 years is much better made than what we have nowadays, because I think, and I see it with clothes as well, and the same as with accessories, is because the production values have just absolutely plummeted, and that's
Mhm.
everything from fabric through to the raw materials, because things are so flimsy. It's actually a lot of stuff is made to break
Yeah.
nowadays. It's not made to last. So really, as soon as you get into anything pre-90s, it's much better quality. And also, especially within the wedding scene, all of these things have only been worn once, and that's so that's another thing to bear in mind. And then of course there's always ask the family, because it's incredible what come out of lofts and chests and jewelry boxes and back of wardrobes. That, and again, the whole thing about something borrowed, so suddenly the aunt's got something, or the grandmother on the groom's side has got something. So it's the whole thing, and that's how a wedding should be. It's about the inclusion of the whole family, and also of your friends, of your bridesmaid. Ask, and then you'll be amazed at what comes out and what you can actually borrow instead of buying. And of course, that's much more pocket friendly as well.
Yeah, and that seems to have been the theme that I think has come out across all of these conversations, is that by doing something more sustainable, which maybe takes a little bit longer,
Mm,
and you have to put a little bit more thought into, actually means that you end up with a much nicer story, and something which, is, you can weave it into the story of your day, because you can talk to your guest about this being your grandmother's veil, or this being your
absolutely.
aunt's handbag, which is slightly nicer than something that you quickly grabbed off the rail.
Yes, well, that's exactly the thing. It's the whole thing about imbuing the day with a bit of soul and a bit of history. And I think you get that much more when it's something that's a bit more involved. And, and as I said, it could be from your friends, or it could be from the family, whatever, whoever you feel more comfortable talking to. But it's all about having those conversations and just opening the doors. And I think especially now, the way that weddings are going is interesting. What I'm seeing is a lot of couples having the smaller service and then intending to have the bigger party later on. And that smaller service could be very intimate in terms of the whole something borrowed and something old. And that, I think, that's just a bit more soulful. Kind of goes back again, as I said, comes back to the core of two people just loving one another and actually want to spend the rest of their lives together. And then everything else is just pretty on the outside.
It's just nice. I'm just going to quickly plug you in, because while my iPad is fully charged, I can see it glaring at me and saying that it's threatening to run out of battery. So I'm going to plug you in. I'm wondering, while I do this smooth tech maneuver, have you noticed more people during the pandemic coming to you? Are people still coming to look for vintage items, as people have been having those smaller, more intimate weddings?
I think, yeah, absolutely. I actually see a real uptick in terms of the vintage. And it is really interesting how the internet has also really democratized that whole availability of,
Hmm.
of this to people, because suddenly, we have all very much embraced, obviously, the online shopping.
Hmm.
And actually, online marketplaces, it's an eBay, but also there's a lot of other, like, pre-loved wedding dress websites and accessories as well. And this is where people are going. And it's really interesting how the handmade and the vintage marketplace, it's so much easier to actually go and find the independent suppliers. And I think good old Google search really show things, and then makes it much easier for people to actually get to what it is they really want to get to.
I love it. And what about the kind of matching element? Because I imagine that's the hardest bit. How do you help people, choose a theme, choose which colours they're going to wear, find things that are going to match them? Because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with.
It is. And I think one of the things, the first thing is, when is your date and where is the setting? And that's always the first thing I ask is, what's your venue and what time of year are you getting married? Because that actually determines quite a lot in terms, and also, of course, what's your skin color, what's your hair color.
Hmm.
That's of course something that comes with it as well. And then we kind of look at what tones to go with that. And I'm always thinking in terms of the wedding dress as well, and the accessories. It's very different to someone getting married in, say, well, not so much at the moment, but say in Italy or Greece in the
Yeah.
middle of summer, versus a castle in Scotland in December. It's that is two very different settings, because at the end end of the day, you want to be comfortable, you want to be warm,
Hmm.
but you don't want to be sweating either. So that kind of sets it all, whether we're kind of going down the hand fans or, the big wraparound stoles. And also in terms of the lightness, in terms of the veils, flower crowns, tiaras, bags, the kind of shoes is also very much determined on what time of year you want to have it, and where you want it to be. So around that, we're also looking, okay, well, if it's September, then we probably have golden lighting. So
Hmm.
the colors you want to choose is probably warmer rather than cooler. If your wedding is in the middle of winter, you might want to go for something really sharp, or you might want to go for, the white and red, or some really strong offset colors. Then you have Christmas weddings, New Year weddings. It really depends on basically the time of year, because the light, the sun at the end of the day determines a lot of this.
I had never thought about that before. Um, in terms
Well,
of
there
the
you go.
I was saying on one of the things yesterday. So I'm going to a wedding in December,
Mhm.
which was going to be a spring wedding. So all of our
Mm.
bridesmaids dresses are, light blue and maybe not a winter color. Will that affect
Mhm.
what they look like in the pictures?
That's interesting. What you might want to do is try and throw in some gold or some warm browns with that as well for December. That might work really well as an accent color for the light blue.
That is a top tip. Thank you so much.
You got it
We've
right
had
here.
a couple of questions come through from people as we've been chatting. So somebody has asked if you have any idea what to do with existing bridesmaids dresses that people might have in their wardrobes and how you can remake them.
No, that's an interesting one. So obviously, this is exactly the thing about bridesmaid dresses, is that they are often only worn once, because they're usually um, not very comfortable or not very flattering, I dare say.
Mm.
I mean, of course, it all depends on the design, but it could certainly be repurposed. Maybe you turn it into a skirt, because that will often work quite well, or turn it into more of a summer dress. Or it can always also be turned in, if it's a group of girls and they all are one another's bridesmaid, then the question is, do these dresses get reused for the next wedding and then the next wedding? Because I've actually seen that before, where I had a girl come in to get married with the bridesmaids, and then a few years later, lo and behold, the bridesmaid was getting married, and she was like, we're actually thinking about reusing those dresses, what can we do? So we looked at it, and we put a new sash on them, we shortened some hems because it was a different time of year
Hmm.
as well. So there's usually something that can be done, because the bridesmaid dresses is, yeah, usually a real waste, actually, which is a shame.
And do you have any advice for brides or bridesmaids indeed, who want to choose something, really flattering that they're going to wear again and again? What are kind of the common mistakes people make that mean that dress ends up in the wardrobe forever?
The common mistake is that every bridesmaid is a different shape and size. And the problem is trying to put every bridesmaid into the same dress. That
Yeah.
rarely works, because, someone will have big boobs, someone will be short, someone will be tall. And actually, what's much better is to go for a theme. So, for example, put everyone in different shades of green, but then
Hmm.
slightly different dresses. Or some bridesmaids I had a few years ago, where there were 6 or 7 of them, they all wore broderie anglaise in different candy colors, and it was
Oh,
beautiful,
gorgeous.
because they were all different skin colors and hair colors anyway, and different shapes. So we had one that was mint green, we had a pink, we had a yellow, we had 2 different shades of blue. So the recurring theme there was that everything was broderie anglaise, but it meant that every girl looked amazing, and it meant that it was dresses that they would still wear in the following year. So try not to put the bridesmaid in the same dress, but kind of have something like a pattern that is recurring, or a color that's recurring with all of them, but not the same style, because it just won't work for
There you
everybody.
go. You heard it here first. Don't try and stick everyone in the same dress.
And
Which
they will hate the bride for it anyway. So
yeah, happy bridesmaids, give everyone their own dress.
exactly,
I really like
goes a
that.
long way. Goes a long way.
The second question somebody's asked is just about upcycling shoes, which I think is a really interesting one, because I imagine, again, a lot of wedding shoes might not be suitable to wear every day or to wear to another party. So is there something else that you can do with them afterwards?
Yes, now this is an interesting one because actually talking of something old, actually, the trouble is with your wedding is that your wedding shoes, you're going to be in them all day and then rarely very comfortable. The
Yeah.
only thing is I can say for wedding shoes, buy a pair of shoes that you want to buy anyway. Now, I have seen Charlotte Olympia and Louboutin and stuff like that people would never in a million year buy normally, but they buy it especially for their wedding because it's not wedding shoes, because wedding shoes are actually pretty plain. So think out of the box. Choose a pair of nice, comfortable shoes that you will wear anyway, or that you want to get, and then work the outfit in around that. I mean, I've had navy blue shoes, golden shoes, we've had rose gold shoes, all sorts of different colors. It's usually quite fun having a
Mm.
pair of shoes like that. But try and think of something that you can wear to your best mate's, birthday party as well as your
The
wedding,
week
because
later.
exactly, and that can be your something new because, or I mean, obviously there's vintage shoes as well, but I mean, I would be a bit more careful with the shoes. So it's a whole thing about actually starting from the beginning. What do you want in terms of shoes? I mean, I've seen people getting married in trainers because
I
they were
was going
just
to say,
like,
do people
yeah,
do the two versus two shoes? So
yeah.
you'd have your nice shoes to wear on the day, and then change into some trainers later.
Absolutely. I mean, I've even had a bride who was going for a festival vibe and she got married in a pair of wellies. So, anything goes. That's the thing. Don't don't be forced to think that it has to be in the way that the bridal magazines tell you it has to, because it really doesn't.
And is that a kind of fear that a lot of people have when they come to, they've spent time looking through all these bridal magazines and they're a bit overwhelmed by the amount of choice there?
Absolutely. It's really interesting how it's hard to see the wood for the trees because there is just too much choice out there. And that is why one of the most important things you can do if you're going to get married is just edit the information and kind of like just keep your vision in mind. And it's really interesting, especially with the dresses and the accessories as well. Quite often people go back to the first or the second because you just know. And it's very easy to then get sidetracked, but then you end up going back to where you were at the beginning and go, actually, well, there's a reason why I chose this first and foremost, is because I had a vision, and that vision then got clouded by all the other things I saw, but I've now returned back to where I came from.
It's the same as every other shopping trip I've ever been on, where you go back to the very first shop that you walked into.
I think there's a lot of psychology at play there. That's probably how it works, actually. Yeah.
We just had another question come through, which was the next one I was about to ask you anyway, which was about menswear, which
Yeah.
we haven't really spoken about before. So, any tips for groom outfits, but particularly, the bow ties, the pocket squares, those little extra kind of accents to make something look a bit nicer?
Absolutely. And again, here it's about the color scheme. And I think there's a lot to be said here also for the something borrowed, which is something people have forgotten. And then in terms of the pocket squares and all the little accessories, again, the internet is your friend. There's a lot there because actually, with accessories, let's not forget men's accessories as well. If you think back, vintage style, you think back to the even 30s to the 50s, how dapper a gentleman was. They knew how to accessorize. So actually going back into the vintage there, you will find some really, really nice stuff. I often see it actually with some people will bring me in old tuxedos and things like that to be altered and repaired. And it's wonderful quality. So in terms of the accessories, I would definitely say for menswear, something vintage is of real interest. And don't forget to look at what granddad has got hiding as well. And again, yeah, the internet is really your friend here, and you can find some really, really cool stuff.
I'm interested in the accessories piece because I think it's something which a lot of people might shy away from, or beyond the tie and the pocket square, they might not be quite sure what those are. So, do you have any examples of things people could kind of add to their outfit?
Well, it kind of depends how fussy you want it to be. I mean, there's obviously always a hat, and then there's, you want to do the flowers as well. But I think the other thing is to bear in mind that nowadays, we need to have somewhere to keep our mobile phone as well. And so these days, it's basically a case of having a credit card, a mobile phone, and your keys. So we perhaps don't need as many accessories as we did in the olden days. But obviously, the other thing I'm always a big fan of, and especially in these COVID times, is gloves. So why not add some, elegant gloves to either the bridesmaid or the groom's party? Um, that's a thing that's just a really fun accessory to kind of pop into the mix as well. And then of course the hats. I think that's definitely an argument for bringing back the hats. It just adds a little extra festivity to the proceedings, I think.
I agree with you, and there aren't many people, I don't think, who wear hats to weddings anymore. So maybe we should bring it back in. Bring it back
Absolutely.
in fashion.
I love a good hat. There's something about it. It just like that really is, the icing on the cake, literally.
And how do you help people choose? This is an interesting question, because I think a lot of people think that they don't suit hats, which is maybe why they don't buy them. So when you're looking at all your kind of vintage array of hats, how do you help people choose the style that's right for them? Because you could go from everything from a fascinator to a 6-foot marvel.
Yes, exactly. Well, again, it's down to actually there's a lot to be said there for thickness of hair as well and how to style things. So you can obviously have everything from a little pillbox, which is usually quite flattering on most people actually.
Gorgeous.
So yeah, exactly. And then yeah, the fascinators are always a good one, and the tiaras. But again, it's just trial and error. I think nowadays most, and especially for summer weddings, you might want something that's really wide brimmed, or you might want something really small. Again, trial and error, and it's fun. It's fun to try on hats, believe me. But that's the thing. So get an idea of the style, and then you can always go and find. So again, vintage hats. There's a lot of vintage hats out there that are always really good fun.
And you said that you normally started this process a year before the wedding with people. So if people are thinking about planning, that's about how long it takes.
Usually, I mean, yes, I would say that in terms of putting the outfit together. And that is why the first question is always, when is your wedding actually? Because you might be doing a fitting in February for a September wedding, and you it's a very, very different light and temperature in February than it is in September. So I mean, of course, things can be done a lot quicker if needs be, but that's just the limit. I believe I have people who want to see me 2 years before their wedding,
Oh, wow.
which has actually been quite handy now with everything being postponed over the last year. But we have to draw the line somewhere, and a year is usually a pretty good is a pretty good time frame.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And we're coming to our final 4 minutes of the session. This half
Mhm.
an hour has flown by. So I wonder if you have any thoughts just to leave people on, if they are thinking about being more sustainable and are maybe interested but are feeling a little bit nervous from your experience of working with wedding parties. What are some of the great stories that have come out of it?
Well, I would definitely say it's all in the mind, and it's very, very easy to kind of get dragged down the route of doing what you feel is the right thing to do because other people tell you, i.e., other media tell you that that's the way to do it. I also think once you have decided that this is the way you want to do, you actually want to think more about what is the impact of the world. Make it clear to your guests, because it's about celebrating the way that you want your way and your day to be. There's no harm in putting on the invite that you're hoping to do this in a way that leaves as little trace as possible. And could they please consider how to travel to the wedding? Could they please make sure that they incorporate something old and something borrowed into their outfit, if at all possible? And also in terms of gifts, if they want to go a gift,
Mm.
how do you want that gift? What do you want that to be? So it's bringing the message out and having that little notch behavior, because actually most people don't really think like that. They just think, oh, brilliant, it's a wedding, it's fantastic, and we're going to go to a big party. But to put that little extra thought into it and get that message out to the wider party, I think goes a really, really long way.
You're bringing people along the ride with you, right? You're kind of giving
Exactly.
people a little bit of direction and instruction into how to turn up and enjoy the day.
Exactly, but not be too prescriptive. It's all, but it's just planting that thought in people's mind. I think goes a really, really long way.
Amazing. Well, I think that's all we've got time for today, but thank you
Oh,
so much for joining us. If
my
people want to
pleasure.
find out a little bit more about you and your amazing work, where can they find you?
They can find me on splendidstitches.co.uk, and they can find me on Instagram, where my handle is at Splendid Stitches as well. So yeah, absolutely, go and have a look. And as I say, I'm based just near King's Cross in Bloomsbury, and yeah, that's it. Have a look at the website.
I would definitely recommend that you all go and check that out, and that you come back here at 12 p.m. where we're going to be talking about how you can have a sustainable wedding breakfast. I'll see you guys then.